Well, that's what the Red Tie community is all about, is about relationships and experiences. And you, my friend, as the best man at my wedding, the person that changed my life as a writer, I'm just so glad that you're on the show today. Greetings, Red Tie community. It's the bald guy in the red tie, your favorite bald-headed, red tie wearing Red Tie community show host, with somebody very, very special to me, probably one of my best friends, someone that changed my life as a human being, as a person of faith, as a writer. The impact that this person has had in my life cannot be put into words, although we will try our best over the next 45 minutes to an hour. Mr. Eric Moser. How are you, buddy?
Doing good. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Yeah, man. Thanks for making the trip down from Bakersfield, California.
Yep. It's my pleasure, obviously.
It's hard to get out of Bakersfield because it's kind of like a vortex
of
nastiness.
Well, when I first moved there, it was just a pit stop. It's been a 20-year pit stop that I've had 2 kids at now, but, you know.
Hey, once you have those kids there, man, those roots get deeper.
Yeah,
it's hard to get that tree out.
Hey, you know, the good things in my life that have always happened to me has never been something that I planned out in most ways, you know. So I couldn't find Bakersfield on a map 30 years ago, but here I am.
There you are. And it's funny because when I would tell people that I'm from Bakersfield, that's usually what they would say, like, oh, yeah, I peed there once. Yeah, so it really is just a pit stop for most people.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It grows on you to a certain extent. I mean, and you find yourself convincing yourself to like it in certain ways. And I think I genuinely do now. I don't know.
Well, I think that's what I love about Temecula down here is that there was this similar valley feel to it, and there's dirt and land.
Right.
Whereas, you know, you go to San Diego, Los Angeles, it's all cement and concrete and things like that. But Bakersfield, growing up there, the last part of the word is field, right. And that's literally all there is. I mean, it's rather awesome.
Yeah.
I miss it. So
yeah, it's pretty incredible because it gets, you know, people look down on it to a certain extent, but it's where all the, you know, we get a bunch of oil and we get a bunch of food out of there, you know, and it's one of those places that has to exist.
It's true.
But you don't live there unless you have to.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's funny. My 20-year high school reunion's coming up in about a week or two, and so I'm part of this Facebook group, and I'll see, you know, a lot of people never made it out of Bakersfield.
Yeah.
Because it just, you know, it's a generational thing, or, you know, people try to go to college somewhere, and then they just end up back in Bakersfield. So.
Yeah. No, it's, you know, the people that I know that are from there, like, I don't think they've ever considered leaving, and they don't really get out of Bakersfield very often, is the funny thing to me. I mean, when I moved there, I kind of thought it was cool just because it was in the middle of everything. You know, you're a couple hours from the beach, a couple hours from San Francisco, a couple hours from Southern California. And I just thought that was awesome. But then, like, you know, I continually meet people that are from there, and they, you know, they maybe go to Pismo occasionally once a year or something like that, but they never get out, you know. And I don't know. It's a weird thing. Bakersfield's, like I said, man, it's become home, and I think a lot of it was because, you know, I do wonder if maybe I hadn't met you immediately, and I didn't have a place to go, and I was just kind of crashing on my parents' couch. I might have gotten out of there a lot quicker, and you know, but just meeting you, and then, you know, and then finding a place, and I was enjoying it, and you know, that probably, so I'd probably have you to blame for being stuck there for so long.
I'll gladly take that blame, sir.
Okay.
Well, you know, you hit a topic there, and I think maybe that's where we'll start the story, is how did we meet, kind of thing. And, you know, I always love stories of how people meet, especially when someone's been such a dynamic force in each other's lives, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can pinpoint the trajectory of your life to how you met somebody and whatnot.
Right.
And so today, boys and girls, we're going to read from my book, The Stare. And you're like, wait, we've heard of this book for years. Where is this book? How do we get this book? Well, it's here in my hands. So we're going to read the story of how I met Eric Moser.
Oh, I've never heard this before. What is it?
Never? pretty sure you edited the book. So
I might have had it.
and so for those who do know the book and have read it, and everybody asks, the Moser review, finally a book that doesn't suck. This is Moser. So this is the Moser review.
That's Hey, I'll give a blurb like that to a lot of things if you pay
But
me.
the joke of this is that it's not finally a book that doesn't suck. It's finally a book that doesn't suck, meaning I just said I wanted to write a book that doesn't suck. And so you're like,
right.
finally it's done.
Yeah.
So that's the inside joke
We've
of that.
got it past not sucking.
Yeah. It's not the best book, but it's pretty damn good.
Oh, I think it's good, man.
All right. The Book of Moser, 1001, chapter 37. In September of 2002, I was crashing a creative writing class at the community college in Bakersfield. Being rebellious and somewhat cheap, or rather more on the poor side, I decided that I'd just go to all the classes, do all the work, but just not bother to pay or enroll. My thought was, I'm going to school for the experience. I don't care about fulfilling society's demanded obligation for higher education. Sounds revolutionary, right? Sure. As I was carousing down the campus corridors on my way to class, coming from the opposite end of the hall was a dopey-looking guy with a big nose, ape-shaped teeth, and stone blue eyes, wearing a backwards Broncos hat to cover his gorilla black hair and headphones covering his little monkey-shaped ears. How many primate parallels can I make there?
You can't help it. I know.
You're part primate. He seemed to be walking in rhythm to the music with his hands clasped against his chest, holding onto the straps of his backpack. He seemed to be a mellow ripple in life's watery pond. As my ripple of destiny coincided with his, a changing wave capable of inspiring a generation was the result. It's amazing how you meet life-altering friends in the most strangely coincidental way. I met Moser as we both reached the door to the class at the same time. His hands on his backpack straps, my hands either in my pocket or picking my nose. We both looked at a letter on the door which said that class was canceled. I looked at him. He looked at me. He shrugged his shoulders. I smirked. And then it goes on from there, man.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that day?
Yeah, I do still. That was a long time ago. But
17 years ago?
just about
Yeah.
something like that.
17 years ago, man.
Yeah.
We're old.
Too many to count, I guess. But yeah, no, I remember that day. It was there were some characters in that class, and you were definitely one of them. But I just yeah, it was like I said, man. It was funny because Bakersfield might have just been a blip on the radar if it hadn't been for that day, you know. And I do remember I didn't enjoy the class in the sense that I felt like for a creative writing class it was a little stilted. It was, you weren't allowed to be as creative as you wanted to be sometimes and things like that. But
You had to be creative within the teacher's box
Right.
of definition of creativity.
And that taught me a lot about college, actually, and that's where a lot of it came from, for sure. But yeah, no, I remember that day, and then we kind of hung out after that, and yeah. Luckily, you had an extra bedroom for me to crash in. And
Well, I think within 20 minutes of meeting you, I invited you to come move in with me.
yeah. And
So that wasn't awkward.
That was a quick come on. I've never had been. I know I'm charming, but that was even kind of funny for me. But no, it was exactly what I needed at that moment, you know.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what that shows the serendipity of it is just, you know, because everything that happened for that next year, you know, you know, it's a funny thing to think of. Oh well, I wouldn't have made it through this or that if X hadn't happened to me and this. But I really feel like that. You know, it was again if I were crashing on my parents' couch and everything that happened afterwards happened. You know, I don't know that I could have really gotten through that next year. You know, and you know, so yeah, that day that's. Because if class hadn't been canceled or something that day, you know, I might have just gone in and sat in the back like I always did, and just not even really talk to you or whatever. And it had to happen that way. So
It's funny how everything happens for a reason, and that's one of the main themes of the book is that all the, canceled class or chance meetings, all those opportunities, you know, it's definitely these thread cross points in the tapestry of life,
Mhm.
and we don't understand it at the time when it's happening. But then years later, 17 years later, you look back and you could see the other side of the tapestry and the beauty of what was created from that.
Sure.
And that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, yeah, and that's like I was saying. I mean, I can't really think of anything good that's happened in my life that I did with a purpose of I started it. I had this idea. I followed through. You take these left turns and you take these random paths that come in front of you. And then the good things come out of it. And it's funny to think how and yet to this day I have 10 things on my list of what's my life going to be next, and I think I'm just going to go from point A to B to C, and it's all going to work out the way I think it's going to work out today, which is foolish.
Until God throws an X and a Z in your ABC,
Sure.
huh?
and thank God it happens,
Yeah. I
mean, life would suck if it just went by my whatever in my small little mind at this time, and I wouldn't enjoy it for sure,
Well, and that's one of the greatest things that you taught me is that life is a story.
Mm.
You really helped me understand writing on just a bigger level kind of thing. Because when we first met, I was writing my book. I was a few years into it, and I remember the first chapter of my book. I gave it to you, and it's probably like 3 or 4 pages, and you read it. And you're one of the most well-read people I've ever met. And so, when you spoke about writing, I listened.
Yeah.
And so do you remember the editing process of that?
I do. And you've always been the type of writer that there's 2 kinds of writers, in my opinion. That there's one that just puts everything on the page and then goes back and whittles it down and makes it what it needs to be. And then there's people that take their time and every sentence is well thought out, and then they don't really do a ton of editing coming back to it. But you've always been the kind that you just had a lot to say and you have to get it out there.
Yep.
Some of it was good, some of it didn't really need to be there.
Yep.
But and I think that's what kind of helped us out with especially with your book was you just had a million ideas and they were all sitting there on paper, and they just had to be whittled down a bit, and yeah, it was. You could tell the bones were there. The structure was fine. You could tell that you had obviously you had an interesting story to tell. You just needed someone to put a hand on your shoulder and say, slow down for a minute there, buddy. All right, let's stop and go, okay, let's 1, 2, 3 here. And then figure it out.
When I started writing, I actually never read a book all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
Like I through high school and stuff like that, I was never much of a reader and things like that. And then at 19, I started journaling and stuff. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to write my life story into a book without ever having read a book, which has pros and cons because on one side of things, I didn't understand how flow and structure works in the writing process. But then I also wasn't shackled to the rules, if you will, because I didn't know the rules.
Sure.
And so I would just write and you go, okay, well, that's interesting, but let's bring it back here into the...
Well, that's what I always liked about you is that you, like you said, you weren't trying to emulate anybody. I mean, at that time I was, half the time I was trying to do my best Hunter Thompson impression or something like that, and it, you didn't have any of those things kind of clouding your head, and you're obviously a very sincere guy, and you had a lot to say, and I used to make fun of you because I'd say, you're writing your memoirs and you're 21 years old, dude. Really? Got that much to say, huh? But it turns out you did.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's the stairs 2, 3, and 4 coming. But it's funny that, I just think you had your sincerity. And obviously, you did have a lot of things that happened to you in just that short amount of time. That's what came through to me. And at the end of the day, you can be Tolstoy if you want, or you can have all that talent. But if you don't have a sincerity to it, if there's not an honesty about it, it doesn't really matter. It's not interesting to people, and people can see it immediately. I think. It comes through almost immediately when you write if there's no real honesty, if there's no real just passion or decency behind it, it just doesn't. You could be the most talented writer on earth, but if it's not interesting, nobody's going to read it. So who cares? You might as well write an instruction manual for IKEA or something like that. So.
Well, and that's the thing about writing is that it's being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
You have to allow yourself to be transparent and vulnerable and share the story, the good, the ugly, the bad, the pretty, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well,
and it's like standing naked in public.
It is.
That's what it is.
Well, and I think what always attracted me to it was it forces a self-awareness on you that I think is healthy for most people, whether it's through writing or music or whatever type of art, or I don't know, woodworking, whatever forces you to have that self-awareness and take a step back and say, who am I, where am I at, what am I doing, because, and especially as I get older, I those times are a lot less frequent where I just sit down and it's quiet and you have time to think about things and say, where am I going? What am I doing? What do I need to change? I think that was writing for me was always that. It was that catalyst that just kind of said, okay, you always discover things. I mean, you know how it feels to. You sit there and you put something down on paper and you have an aha moment all of a sudden.
Well, writing for me was always a sense of reflection and introspection, like you're saying, that self-awareness.
Yeah.
And what's interesting when I write, I don't know what's going to come out.
Sure.
You know what I mean? The words just kind of flow out kind of thing. And I like to believe that there's a touch of the divine in the creative artistic process.
Absolutely.
And when you allow yourself to just flow with it, it's amazing what comes out.
Yeah.
And so that was the biggest rush for me. And I remember when I was writing, when I flew back to Boston, and I really started breaking those chapters apart and really dialing it in and stuff like that.
Right.
I remember writing, and it was the chapter of my mom passing away. So one of the most emotional moments, right, and the most cathartic moment. But I would literally shiver, and it was like this electrical current that was flowing through me. It was the most powerful thing I've ever experienced as a writer.
Yeah.
And it was pretty phenomenal, man.
Well, and it's, I don't know how to say it without it sounding weird, but that's my favorite part of the book. I think that's the most well-written part of the book.
Yeah.
I think it really shows what shaped you as a man going forward, and I think that was my favorite part of the process working with you on that was really getting, I had an aha moment as I'm going through it, because at first it was just this sprawling chapter that tried to encompass all of everything that happened to you with your mom dying, and I remember, as we were talking about it and as we were making those, the metaphor of the valley and Central Valley, and as it goes from green to brown, and just being that was my favorite part of it for sure, was being able to kind of say, oh man, this is going to work out. This is really well written now,
Well, and that was one of the biggest things that you showed me was how do you tell the passage of time in writing through those metaphors and stuff like that, And that's the biggest challenge of a writer is that you can write about a year of your life in one paragraph, one chapter, one whole book kind of thing. So how do you condense or expand the selection of words to tell the story and the narrative and stuff like that?
Right.
So
Well,
you really help shape that.
Yeah, and that's always the challenge, right? Is that the story's complete in your head. It all makes sense. It's a definite narrative in your brain that and yet how do you communicate that to other people to where it becomes universal enough that they can relate to it, and hopefully they feel the way you felt at that time, and that's the challenge, but it's also the funnest part to do because when you hit the mark, it feels good.
And probably one of the most rewarding parts of writing a book and publishing it and putting it out there for others to read is that, art is subjective, right? So when other people read it, they go, wow, this reminds me of when I lost my mom or whatever. And so it becomes a healing tool for them
Sure.
as they read the story.
Well, and that's what it needs to be, isn't it? I mean, you can't sit there and write something that, if you set out to write the world's most universally, I don't know, acknowledged book, as far as, I'm just going to try to write a story that everyone understands and everyone feels at the same time, you're going to fail miserably. Yeah. It needs to be about you. The specificity is what really brings the universal appeal to it out of it. And you can't set out to sit there and write a book or write anything that somebody's going to feel. It almost can't be your goal. Your goal just has to be to, like I said, be honest and try to communicate as clearly as possible to the people that are reading it, and that's what makes it. That's what makes people really feel it, and they connect to it. And it's an odd thing. Yeah. It starts off selfishly, and it becomes something bigger than that.
Well, what was interesting about the way that I structured the book is that, that first chapter that talked about my mom's battle with cancer and death, all in one chapter kind of thing, and then we broke that up into 10 chapters.
Right.
And I think the book is about 40 chapters or whatever, and they're relatively short chapters and whatnot. But that first 10 chapters really set the emotional foundation for what happened after that story. With the psychedelics and some of that self-medicating that I did, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old kind of thing.
Right. Well, and it, in a lot of ways, it's something that still to this day is how I guess it set the way that you deal with adversity in your life. Is that was kind of that was foundation. That was is formational for you, in that it just became a background reason or a background thing that was always kind of swirling around whatever happened to you in your life after that, and unfortunately those things have to happen to, we've all had things that happen to us in our lives that allow us to continue, that make us stronger and things like that, but they don't come for free. It's difficult.
I remember when we were living at the apartment together in Bakersfield, we would pray for strength and patience, and that year was just a year of being broken down and delays and all that kind of stuff. And one of the greatest spiritual lessons you taught me was that when you pray for strength and patience, God doesn't go, oh yeah, here you go. You need patience? Okay, now you're patient.
Right.
No,
right.
He teaches it to you,
of course,
through adversity and through the hard times and standing in line and waiting for things,
Yeah.
But when you get to the end of that, that's where that fruit really bears.
Sure. And we were such young men, and we were, you wanted, I don't know. It was typical young man, just not really thinking 3 steps ahead, or 2 steps ahead, step and a half ahead, and I think we both had a realization that, like, okay, what we're asking for right now is only going to come one way, and it's going to be difficult and it's going to be painful at times, and it was too late. But you know what? It was something that to this day, I mean, whether it's my business or it's, family or whatever's going on, it's something that I got the strength and I got some of the patience that I asked for. And I've been through situations, and thank God you were with me for some of them, that I know I can handle most things that come my way now to a certain extent, and again, that's me probably being foolish.
I got this.
But yeah, it was something that we learned, and I remember talking to you about it and thinking, well, I guess we're going to get what we asked for here.
So here's a little glimpse of what it was like living together.
Uh-huh.
We'd stay up at all hours of the night discussing everything from writing to religion to drinking to the purpose of life, all of which intertwined with the other, kind of like the Catholic alcoholic writing monk that spent a lifetime in a cave writing the words for all of humanity. When I first met Moser, I considered myself a person that could write, but Moser actually called himself a writer. I can't imagine living the suburban life of simplicity, holding down a 9-to-5 job, mowing the grass, and getting the mail. I have to write, he'd say. It's in my blood, my soul. I would nod my head as we each sat at the edge of the kitchen counter at 3 in the morning, drinking our 12th beer. Moser was a deep thinker and the most well-read person that I had ever encountered. He would start most of his conversations like, Hunter Thompson once wrote, then he'd quote him word for word. Or he'd say, C.S. Lewis wrote such and such. Or, in the Bible, Paul said. I'd sit there on the edge of the counter with the little dim microwave light shining in on our conversations, and I'd listen. I personally had read maybe 10 books all the way through, and most of them were Dr. Seuss books. So I'd hear him quote these great larger-than-life and mysterious writers as if he knew them personally, left me in awe. You know, John, he'd say, writing is eternal. Think about it. All of these writers throughout the ages and for thousands of years would be nothing but a name on a tombstone somewhere in the ground. Then he'd point his finger in a very matter-of-fact kind of way. But their words, ah yes, their words have lived forever. Shakespeare would just be another box of bones in a graveyard. But because of his words, he lives every day in so many people's minds and souls. Ah yes, writing is eternal. I'd nod my head and listen. Then I'd say the most wise thing that I can think of. Something like, I've got to pee. Want another beer? Nah, he'd say, it's time for the whiskey. Then I'd make my way to the bathroom, and he'd make his way to the porch, where he'd pee off of it and into the neighbor's yard, while he smoked a cigarette and stared poetically at the silent moon rising above the eastern Bakersfield Mountains.
Funny thing is, I gotta go mow my lawn in the suburbs as soon as I get back.
Yeah, 21-year-old Moser would punch 38-year-old Moser in the face.
Oh yeah, he would not be. Yeah, he would. He might understand. Probably not.
Well, so people understand who you were at 21. You were philosophical, political, a little bit of Rage Against the Machine, anti-establishment. You had the heart of a 21-year-old man.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and you don't have to be pragmatic when you're that age. You don't have a kid. You don't have a mortgage. You can have that, and you can, and you think it's going to last forever, of course. And clearly it doesn't, and for different reasons. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think my young man self would look at myself now and say, "Man, look at him, combed his hair today. What an idiot." Yeah.
Oh,
so no, it's but I wouldn't change a thing. Honestly, it shaped me, and and to be honest, it gave that individualistic streak. It finally got funneled down, but I wouldn't have the business I have now if I didn't have that streak in myself. I mean, those are things that you never stay true in the punk rock no sellout type of way that you really think but it can give you the forms of what you become and helps you out in life, and I had fun.
A lot of fun, man.
It was.
It's been a journey over these years, and one of the things that you allude to in your conversation here, about that year that we lived together, and this was in 2002 to 2003 that we lived together, and something very important and life-changing happened to you that year that we were living together.
Yeah.
That was we had a very good friend, your friend, but my friend through association kind of thing.
Yeah.
His name was Joe Peelstrom. And he was the lead singer of Urban Life, which was a band out in Tempe, Arizona, which is where you lived before coming to Bakersfield.
Yep.
Well, I remember that morning, I think it was in May, he called at 4 in the morning and left us a voicemail.
Yeah, we were both in bed, but we got the message that he was on his way out. And what's funny is that when I lived there with him and Bobby and a couple of my other friends, we'd take random middle of the night road trips, and we always did it. And sometimes it was probably not the best idea, but here I'm still around, so I guess. But yeah, it was just another day, and Joe was on his way, and we were looking forward to it. And but yeah, that was. I still remember that day very clearly. I still remember when I got the phone call that Joe had been in a car accident and passed away, and one of my other good friends was in the hospital, and actually down here at UCSD, and I remember where I was at in the apartment. I remember everything that happened that day, and I had a great girlfriend, and she was supportive, and obviously my family was there for me. But that's why I say you had already been through something, as difficult, and you kind of, having you there. I remember I was sitting on the porch, and you had just gotten off of work, and I don't remember. I think maybe my girlfriend had called you and told you what happened or whatever, but you knew by the time you got there. And I remember sitting there and seeing you pull up and hustle up the stairs to come and see me, and it was, and I hadn't really processed it or even allowed myself to really start processing it but then you got there, and it was, that's when I kind of hit me. And it's something I don't think I would wish on my worst enemy, to be honest, but but Joe was just, it felt so cruel, just because Joe was such a talented guy, and I still to this day, I still would be amazed to see what he would have done, as he got older and things like that, and he probably would have sold out in the same ways I've sold out, but he'd still be cooler about it than I am. He always was.
Well, what was phenomenal about Joe is that, I'm just relaying the stories that you told me about him, is that, he produced so much music, and he died at 21 or 22?
21. Yeah.
21 years old. So in 3 or 4 years, the amount of songs that he produced, and this was all like, homegrown kind of
Yeah.
music kind of stuff that he put together, but it was so talented. And I think maybe in one of these clips I'll include one of his songs, maybe Highest Plane for Me or something like that,
Yeah.
This letter telling me how I'll comply with your policy. Can it get any better? Tell me now, 'cause I'm a wreck. Now wouldn't surprise me. Oh yeah, I'm tired of waiting. My feet are tied down and I'm so frustrated. Is this the highest plane for me? Oh yeah, I'm tired of waiting. My feet are tied down and I'm so frustrated. Is this the highest plane for me? What'll it ever be? Sun beams down and shines a light on us little ants, all marching in a row. I got my back piled up on with memories and things I have yet to know. Started wasting time the other day, thinking about all this, thinking about trying to decide my new direction, trying to decide if I needed to make some of my own correction. Hey, I fought with myself because I'm not the type of man to confront. I'll be blunt. I look for the answers, I look for the reasons. The seasons change, but the heat'll always creep in. The conclusions I can make are starting to make me not care. I swear I wish these thoughts were never there, 'cause if they were, oh, it would all be good. Oh yeah, I'm tired of waiting. My feet are tied down and I'm so frustrated. Is this the highest plane for me? Oh yeah, I'm tired of waiting. My feet are tied
way he had gone from like keyboard, teaching himself how to play guitar, to the sophistication he got, you know, and he had made a new song right before he died, and he had sent it over, and you know,
Holidays.
Yeah, and the sophistication he got, like you said, it's just pretty amazing. It showed his talent, and it showed, you know, what he had to offer, and I think it's something that you know, I'm glad that I still have it to a certain extent. You know, on my better days, I try not to lament what was maybe lost, but just enjoy what we had, and. yeah, he was just such an amazing, talented kid. Everything he did. I mean, I met him when we were skateboarding, and he was fun to skateboard with, and he was really good at it. And he was just one of those guys that just whatever he picked up, whatever he tried to do, he was good at. And I'm really happy. I got to be his friend for as long as I did.
Yeah.
So.
Let's see, I think I got a part in here about that night here. One second here. As if things weren't going downhill spiritually at the end of May, as I was serving tables at Caro's, I got a call from my girlfriend at the time, her voice sad and crying. John, Moser's friend, was killed in a car accident. I dropped the phone and fell to my knees. Moser's friend, Joe Peelstrom, the lead singer of the stoner band Urban Life, had come out a few months from Arizona to visit us, and today was to be the same. We had gotten a call earlier that morning from Joe on our answering machine saying that he was on his way out to see us. When Moser played the message, he got excited and was ready for a night of partying with Joe. But now, Joe was dead. In a sense, so was Moser. I rushed out of the restaurant and pulled into the parking lot of the apartment and ran up the 38 steps of stairs to our place. When I walked in, I saw Moser's chick, Sonia, standing in the small hallway, holding her arms sadly to herself. "Where's Moser?" I asked, short of breath. She pointed to the balcony. I walked out over to the sliding screen door and slid it aside and took a seat next to Moser. He had his hands folded against his chin, his stare distant and dead. The silence was thick and saturated with sadness, and then I placed my hand on his shoulder and I said, "Let it out, man. Just cry and let it out." Before I finished saying that, he began shuddering and crying from the depths of his soul. Joe was like a little brother to Moser, and he, like I was to Adam Pierce. I knew how Moser was feeling in that moment. I knew that he just had to cry and let the pain go.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, man, it's something that I knew you had been through it with Adam and with your mom, and as much as Sonia was there for me and my family, obviously, it was something that I just it was really important that you had that experience, and you were still standing there in front of me, and you'd been through it and you lived through it, and you were able to take it and still move on, and I think that's what was important. It's not that you just have support, it's that you see that there's another side. This isn't just dead stop, everything's done, everything, you can't move on type thing. I think that's what was important.
There was a path forward.
Sure. And it's helped me out, I mean, obviously it's not the last person that's been close to me that has passed away, and it's not going to be, there's going to be more, unfortunately. It's just part of life. But when you're young, it's just such a foreign concept. It's an abstract idea. Your mortality, especially when you're young, it's almost something you play with when you're young. I mean, and
You're invincible.
Sure.
You're not going to die.
Yeah.
And so for Joe to die at 21, and Adam was 23 when he died.
Right.
It shakes you to your core because you don't have that sense of context.
No. And exactly. And it's a tough way to do it, but you got to learn it, and fortunately for some people that comes through, their favorite pet dying or something like that, and I'm not to minimize that or anything like that, but it's just everybody learns that lesson in a different way, and hopefully it's not as difficult as you had it, but we all have to learn that lesson, and but it makes you appreciate what you have, and it makes you appreciate being able to come to San Diego and Temecula, and and you really appreciate the relationships that you have, and it makes it and it brings into focus what's important, and it makes you be able to enjoy what's important in life, and like I said, hopefully people don't have to learn it that tough, but if you do, you're all the tougher for it. I mean, when my brother-in-law passed away a couple years ago, that was, it was similar to what you went through with your mom. You see a person that you've known for a long time, and then just all of a sudden they have cancer, and then you just watch them deteriorate to the point where, those last couple days are about as ugly as anything you'll ever see in your life,
Yeah.
And in a way, what happened with Joe and going through the things I did, I had to be there for my wife. It was her brother that was dying, and so I was able to allow her to go through what she needed to go through, and at least be some, support system for her that maybe I couldn't have been if I hadn't been through it already, so, but I don't know.
Well, and the power of writing, being able to capture the emotions and the stories of people's lives and our own life and stuff like that. I look back at this book, and I remember when I was writing the book. My main goal was to be on Oprah,
Of course.
and jump on her couch and
Sure.
I'd sell 1 million copies the next day, kind of thing. Like,
Right.
That's every writer's goal, right?
I mean, it's not to say it still won't happen.
Maybe.
Right.
Well, it's funny because, people have heard glimpses of, I'll talk about my book, but then I'll like pull it back kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And I'm kind of going through this hesitation about fully releasing it and promoting it. And perhaps maybe this is a catalyst for doing so.
Mm-hmm.
But, having 3 boys going, in some very influential times of their ages and stuff like that.
Right.
There's a lot in this book that, it's some of my darker days and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I have this hesitation where I don't want them to grow up in the shadow of the book if it did go off really big or whatever. And then, there's all these stories about, well, don't you know what your dad did? kind of stuff. But I've talked to some people, and they say that, having that transparency and vulnerability and honesty with your kids, saying, hey, look, I've gone through these things, and, maybe it actually would be beneficial. What are your thoughts?
It gives a legitimacy to it, I mean, you can't. I think the thing I struggle with, especially with parenting now, is that you try to be, I don't know, you're always dad, quote unquote, and it's just, I think showing that you're actually a fully formed human being with a lot of different experiences gives you more credence when they're teenagers, they're going through things, and it's not just, dad doesn't understand me and blah, it's, no, I've been through it. I've been there, dude. And here's what you should try to avoid, but the thing is that they have to have those experiences. I mean, they can listen to you and they could believe you, and they, obviously they, they love you and they listen to you to a certain extent, but they have to have those too. And I think that's the most painful thing, is that what you went through, your kids kind of have to go through too, and there's nothing you can really do. You can try to shield them, you can try to point them in the right direction, but ultimately we don't really learn things as humans unless people can tell us those things a million times, but we don't learn those things until we experience them, and so I would encourage you to go through with it. I would, and I always have thought you should, but I wouldn't worry so much about, I think your boys will see it as, I think they'll learn a lot about you that maybe they don't see on a day-to-day basis when you're just dad and you're taking them to school and telling them to do their homework and, take out the trash or whatever. I learned a lot more about myself when I started seeing my dad as a human, not just as dad, not just as the guy that paid the bills and told me to stop being an idiot when I needed to stop being an idiot. When I learned how much my dad was just a human being, and he had done dumb things and he'd done smart things, and I think that taught me a lot, more about myself, and I was able to appreciate it, a lot more than just like, dad doesn't let me do what I want. I think that's an important transition, and you're in the middle of it. So good luck.
Yeah. Jack's 14, Justin's almost 12, and Jet's almost 9.
Yeah.
And so, it's interesting to be a parent right now. And what's really interesting too is that, Jack's 14 and I was a little bit older than him when my mom got sick, kind of thing.
Right.
And what's interesting is I remember my mindset at being 15, 16 years old when that was happening is that, well, she's old and I'm almost an adult. Like you have this, sense of self-accomplishment at 16 when you haven't done anything in life, right?
Well, you got your license.
Yeah, barely. Barely. Ink was still wet on it.
Right.
But, and so I see the dynamic of Jack with my wife, Jen, and that mother-son bond and stuff like that. And makes me realize, man, I was just a baby. I was just a kid.
Yeah.
Literally a child.
Yeah.
I was not a man, I was a child.
Oh, yeah.
That lost his mom.
Yeah, and you were forced to, well, you grew up pretty quick.
Had
you had to.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Luckily, your kids, won't have to go through that to a certain extent, and it's, but that's good. Isn't that what we want for our kids? Give it to them. They have it a little better than we did. That's all I really shoot for, honestly.
I also think that there's something to be gained in adversity and pain.
Yeah.
And, you used to use this analogy. We were talking on one of our apartment nights, after some beers and stuff like that, and you always had the philosophy. But you said, and I think this is a C.S. Lewis thing, but it was something along the lines of, God is kind of like a doctor. And, so you break your wrist and it's all shattered and stuff like that. And do you want the doctor just to give you some pills and say, well, all right, I hope this makes you feel better kind of thing? Or do you want him to allow you to go through some pain and reset it properly?
Sure.
And yeah, it's going to hurt right now, but it's going to be best for you in the long run.
Yeah,
Something along those lines.
He's a surgeon. And
it's weird, I guess. C.S. Lewis compares it to do you want to go to a surgeon that, despite the fact that the operation might be a little painful, he's going to do a good job, or do you want to go to the surgeon that the first time you say ow, he stops doing it and just does a really horrible function in your entire body? I think God is that surgeon that understands that you're going to complain about a little bit about this and that. Yeah. In the end, the surgery is necessary and it needs to happen. Yeah. If God listened, every time I start bitching about something that made hurt a little bit too much, I mean, that's what he's. I guess that's what God I would want, which is, stop where I said, just leave me, to do what I want. But fortunately, God is wise and he can see a lot further down the road than I can, so he understands that. I may not like the adverse effects of, of whatever surgery I'm going through right now, but he has to complete it and has to do it in the right way. Yep. Or else the effects later on in life will be, 10 times worse. So do you believe God?
And you're in the middle of surgery and it hurts, but you can let him finish and do it properly, or you can just say, oh, it hurts right now, so stop, and be crippled for life, essentially, and so it's, you have to let that process play out, and you have to go through and let the surgeon do his work. He knows more than you do. You ain't gonna do surgery on yourself, and you're not gonna be any better for it. It's just up to you,
Yeah.
And that's just, but again, that's something that I think it's harder for us to watch it with our kids probably than even to go through it ourselves to a certain extent, because you just, isn't that what's wrong with them most of the time, is that they're too coddled, you know? And of course, that's our natural impulse, is to coddle them and to keep them away from, those types of things. But for them to be fully formed human beings and to, I have to take a step back all the time and say, man, if they're gonna, I ain't gonna be around forever for them, and they gotta, and they're gonna have kids one day, and I want them to be good people, and that process, just like we talked about, was asking for strength, asking for patience, asking for wisdom. They have to go through those same things that you do. It sucks. Sometimes you just gotta stand there and let it happen to him.
And one of the other major themes and lessons that you taught me was the law of polarity. And the law of polarity was basically, and maybe that's not the proper term for it, but that's what I always call it. But basically, you know, when someone has gone through the depths and the darkness, the depth, you know, the bottom of it, you know, by the law of polarity, the opposite end of it is something very beautiful and on the higher end of things.
Right.
You know, that strength and
Yeah.
the gain that comes from the pain.
Yeah. Well, and it's gonna happen to all of us, but it's something that shows you that, you know, I wouldn't have taken Joe's death as hard as it was for me without. It was because I had so many good times, and I felt I was so, you know, strongly connected to him as, you know, one of my best friends, and, you know, that's where the pain comes from. Is because on one end of things you have such a strong bond to somebody that when you lose them, and inevitably you will lose them, it's painful.
Yeah.
You know, that the amount of pain you feel is almost directly proportional to the amount of good that you gain from that relationship, and the emotions and the just the decency and that friendship that you had, you know. And every time you feel it, you know, when I sit here with you, when I come see you, and I don't see you so often, and or whatever, or my family, you know, those are all it's what gets us through those days, you know. But unfortunately, it's all gonna stop one day.
That's what I love about doing this show. And, you know, Red Tie Community, it's about the relationships and the experiences.
Mhm.
And, you know, when you have those relationships and experiences, that's what creates that bond, and that's what creates community,
Yeah.
you know. And community is so important for us humans. We need to know
Absolutely.
that we're not alone. We need to know that, you know, if I fall, you'll pick me up, and vice versa.
Right.
And that's very important.
Yeah. And, you know, whether it's family or friends or whatever, you have to have that, you know. I mean, we're social animals, and for a reason. And it's good. We need those things. I mean, it takes a community to build this place, you know, put a roof over your head. And, you couldn't do it on your own.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, no, it's you realize over the years that as time goes on and you lose people and you have good times, you have bad times, you realize that that's, you know, that's the best backstop to anything, you know. It's just having those people around you that you can trust, and you just got to enjoy it, man. You know, there's never going to be another August 2nd, 2019 when I hang out with John, you know, and but I get to enjoy it while it lasts, you know. And
Yeah.
August 2nd, 2075 or whatever, it could all be gone, man. But you know what?
Yeah.
That doesn't matter right now, you know, and it shouldn't take away from just enjoying having a conversation with your friend, you know. But it's what keeps me coming down to place, you know, come to Temecula or whatever I had to do, you know. I mean, because it's important,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, I could sit on my couch and never go out, I guess, but
Well, and you know, I like to get up to Bakersfield, and you always let me crash at your place there when we go to visit Arturo, and
Yeah.
you know, that's it's become a nice routine every 3 or 4 months. Just kind of show up, and
yeah,
you know, it's important for the soul to recharge those batteries.
Definitely.
And you know, having people in your corner that have those long roots in your life, kind of thing, that's important.
yeah,
And as writers, you know, it's just fun to capture these memories. And, you know, I guess maybe this show is kind of like an evolution of the written word for me. It's kind of the
Right.
spoken word of things, you know?
right,
And, but what's beautiful about capturing this media and stuff like that is that, you know, like you taught me about the written word, how it's eternal. It's like, you know, with YouTube and these videos and stuff like that, it's like, this is out there, and it's going to be out there, God willing, unless media changes and all that kind of stuff. But to capture these moments and these conversations and experiences and the relationship that we have, it's a very powerful dynamic.
Yeah.
It's very beautiful, man.
yeah. Well, it's the small moments. There's never some, you know, most of us don't win the Super Bowl and go to Disneyland on national television, man. It's just the small moments you have in your life, and you enjoy them while you have them, you know. And yeah, and writing is able to capture those moments, and when you can put when you can distill something like that into a certain, again, what is wholly specific to you can become something that's universal to everybody, and that's all you're trying to capture every day. You never know what little vignette in life is going to become the next chapter in the book or something like that, you know.
So true.
Just be aware of it, at least, you know, or try to be, maybe while it's happening. And yeah.
I think having a profound sense of the end of things and death in a healthy manner, meaning understanding that this too shall pass and not everything lasts forever kind of thing, makes you enjoy the moment so much more on a deeper level, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and you have to, you know, you don't take it for granted, you know, and you enjoy it. Well, you know, and that, it's definitely, it has to be a healthy sense of it's all gonna go away, you know. We're even us as a species, it's all gonna be gone one day, man. We're gonna look like Mars one of these years, you know, and then the sun's gonna swallow the earth.
Yep.
You know, it doesn't give a shit whether you or I were here, dude.
Just be dust.
That's right. But you know what? It makes me enjoy it all the more when I think, you know, sometimes people look at the stars and they feel insignificant to a certain extent, but yeah, you are. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay. But I'm significant to my wife and my children. I'm significant to you. I'm significant to my family. And I don't have to be the biggest star in the galaxy, right?
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't, you know, I still enjoy my life. I you know, and I've had to learn it the hard way for sure, but I'm glad I did.
And Ecclesiastes really captures that, is that, you know, man doesn't know what's going to come after him kind of thing, but, you know, God has appointed that we enjoy our every day under the sun, man.
Right.
Just enjoy your work.
Yeah.
You know, your family.
Yep. You get up every day and just glad I got up today.
Very true.
It was hard.
Well, I'm glad that you're down here. I'm glad that you stopped in to be on the show, man. And any final thoughts or wise words you'd like to share?
No, I appreciate you having me, man. And again, I'm sorry that it took so long to get down here. And I think what you do, I think you help a lot of people out, man. And it's something that I've always really admired, and I hope you keep doing it for a long, long time, buddy.
Me too, man. Well, thank you for being on the Red Tie Community Show. And that's it for this episode of the Red Tie Community Show with Mr. Eric Moser and the bald guy in the red tie, saying see you in escrow. Bye.